He hath not let me die. The enthralling life story of Sam Domb's early years paints a vivid and horrifying picture of Europe's darkest days in World War II. This work is so much more than a thriller, sweeping the reader along at a breathless pace into the book's core, its knotty depths. This is the tale of a Jewish boy who, despite frightful events and unending trials, survived against all odds. From the inferno of the Holocaust, he immigrated alone to Israel and acclimated there. Subsequently, his life's journey led him to the United States, where he has since resided and is today a successful businessman, prominent leader of his community, and a Jew ever serving his people and the state of Israel. The book is divided into 3 main sections. The first section includes the period of World War II and the Holocaust, until his aliyah to Israel. The second details his life in Israel, on the kibbutz in Ra'anana, his service in the Israel Defense Forces and for the state. The last section reviews his life in the United States, his family, his business dealings, his activities on behalf of the State of Israel, and in the service of the Jewish community in the United States and worldwide. The first memories start as a little boy on September 5, 1939. German shelling of Shalom's native city of Polotsk, Poland, had Shalom and his family sitting in the corner of the room under a blanket trembling. Even though he was just a young boy, Shalom knew that life as he had known it would be changed forever. All Jews from the neighborhood were told to get out of their houses and wait in the courtyard or the front of their houses. Men were told to step out of the lines and were taken into forced labor. Shalom's father was not an exception. He would leave the house early in the morning and return late at night with horrible stories of what was happening in their town and stories of the other nations who were getting involved in the war. Big rabbis in the community were beaten for everyone to see and then made to clean the streets. It was the time around the holidays, and although the town was usually bustling with preparations, this year it was quiet with community members hiding in their houses petrified. A few weeks later, the dreaded day had come when the Germans started banging on the door telling everyone they must leave. People were not given time to get dressed, so most were in pajamas, some barefoot, but still forced to march along the path they were told. All who tried to leave the line were shot dead in their tracks. Shalom and his family were one of many families forced to pass these dead bodies. Shalom was terrified and buried his head in his mother's chest. She carried him close while 2 of his sisters held their father's hand, and his older sister walked along with her hand on her sister's shoulder. They marched on in a line until they came to a park where they were told to hand over all their valuables, including rings and jewelry. They were subjected to an embarrassing search, and anyone caught hiding something was flogged and then shot to death. They carried on like this until evening, marching towards the Wishkov Bridge, a wooden bridge that connected the 2 banks of the Naru River. 5 Germans urged them along, beating them and stabbing them with their bayonets. Shalom's mother tripped and fell. His father quickly reached down to help her up, but the Germans were quicker, shooting her while she was still holding Shalom in her arms. Her screams were blood-curdling. My sisters and I set up a deafening wail. In a split-second decision, Father pulled me from Mother's arms, though I sobbed bitterly and held my arms out toward her, vehemently refusing to part from her. Mother was shot by a Nazi monster, without reason and with absolutely no hesitation. Many Jews were thrown over the bridge into the river, many beaten and tortured, and many shot to death for no reason. Shalom's father, with his children, decided to try and get as far away from the fear and horror as possible, and at any cost. Shalom's father decided to hide him with a Polish friend of his with whom he had business ties. The girls stayed behind, and father carried Shalom, trying to reassure him that everything would be okay. He choked back tears as he was talking, but knew it was in the best interest of his child. When they got to the house of father's friend, he was told he would spend the night in the cellar, which was down a staircase in the shed. Shalom was nervous and saw other Jews hiding in there. One of the boys, a few years older than Shalom, told him to sit down near him. Shalom did not feel scared, and he did not hesitate to sit next to the boy. He trembled from the cold, especially since he had bare feet, and the boy, whom he calls Michael, brought him a rag and some hay to cover him to keep him warm. That is the way he spent the night. By dawn, they heard motorcycles and other vehicles approaching. It seems as if the Pole that was hiding them gave them up to the Germans. Soon the Germans swarmed the shed and took all of the Jews hiding in there. Michael held on to Shalom's hand the whole time and tried to give him a sense of safety, even though they had no idea where the Germans were taking them. They soon reached a clearing, and the Germans put the Jews in groups of 10. 2 jeeps with machine guns were positioned in one corner, and the Nazis ordered the first 10 to line up. Within seconds, the machine guns went off, and the Jews who were in a line crumpled and dropped. Everyone started crying, knowing that their turn would soon come. Shalom stood in the second group with his friend Michael, petrified by what was happening in front of him and what he anticipated to come. The Germans yelled for them to step up, and while preparing to move, Michael tugged on Shalom's arm and whispered, "Run after me quickly." Michael forcefully pulled Shalom and did not let go of him for a second. One of the soldiers noticed their escape and chased them, even firing a few shots at them that thankfully passed over their heads. Soon after, the firing stopped and they found a safe place in the tall corn stalks in which to hide. That day, after Michael saved his life, Shalom started believing in guardian angels. They stayed there, and Shalom slept for a while, waking right before dawn. Following the sound of the river, they continued on. When they got to the river, they washed Shalom's bare feet and drank without stopping. They slept under the bridge until they again heard the Germans. They stayed quiet and were thankful they had not been found. Michael had an idea to make their way to another home of a Polish friend of his father. The Pole took them in, and his wife tended to Shalom's feet and also treated Michael. She gave them something to eat, clean clothes, and a pair of shoes for Shalom. They sat and told the story of everything that had transpired so far. The Pole decided he would smuggle them in his wagon under hay to the Russian side where they would be safe. They did just that the next morning, and the Pole left them in an area close to the border that was under Russian rule. They found a place to stay until dark. That is when they would try to make their way to the Russian town over the border, where they were told by the Pole that many families were gathered looking for lost ones. Night soon came, and they walked towards their destination. They walked on a path instead of the paved road, wary of who might be traveling on the road. As they neared closer to town, they saw many Jews in the streets, knowing that these Jews had been displaced just like they had. They approached a man with a beard and peyot who was praying, and who was surprised to see them. After asking where they had come from, he pointed them in the direction of the synagogue where many Jewish refugees had gathered. They were allowed to enter the synagogue and told the elder rabbi of their journey up until now. He immediately got them some food and asked to spread the word quickly about the 2 young boys looking for their families. Michael got a blanket and covered Shalom, who quickly fell asleep. He was soon awakened by a tall man asking if he was Domb, stating that his father was making his way to the synagogue as they spoke. Michael was just as excited as Shalom. Shalom hugged Michael as he was leaving with his father. He gave one last smile to his angel as he walked out of the synagogue. That is the last time that they saw each other, and to this day he does not know his name or what has become of him. Father led Shalom to where the rest of the family was waiting. When they saw him, they started crying and hugging each other. They were so happy to be back together as a family. Father decided in order to be able to set up some kind of life for his family, they would have to move to a big city, so off they went to Białystok. They packed whatever supplies they had accumulated and set off in their wagon. When they got to Białystok, the damage done by the Germans was apparent. There were many refugees there as well. Father set out and found an unused truck at the edge of the city that they could use as a hiding spot. He sold the horse and wagon, so now the family would have to pack up and carry all of their belongings just like the other refugees. Father found a job pumping gas for army vehicles passing through. They were doing their best to survive under such conditions when Father started to get a bad feeling. Not long after, they were wakened by sirens. The Germans had started to attack Russia, and Shalom and his family packed up quickly and made their way to Minsk. There, Father was drafted into the army, leaving his older daughters to care for Shalom. This was the beginning of wandering that lasted for 4 years, led by Shalom's 15-year-old sister Ita. They traveled to many different towns until finally reaching Kutaisi, Georgia. Here the Jewish community took pity on the 4 orphans and got them clean clothes, food, and made sure they were taken care of. They registered with the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration to make it easy for Father or another relative to locate them. They stayed in Kutaisi about a year when the news finally came that the war has ended. The horrors of the Nazis were exposed, and people could not believe the mass murders that had taken place for no reason at all. Soon after, they got word that Father had used the services set up by the United Nations to try and locate his children, and that Father would be joining them soon. A few days later, they were reunited with Father. The happiness for each of them was apparent to everyone around them. Father knew how lucky he was to not only have survived the army, but to be reunited with his kids who had survived the past 4 years alone. Father spoke to some people and decided it would be best for them to move on. They boarded a train and were again on their way, this time to Luge. Making several stops on the way to change trains, it was difficult to find a spot to put their things down and try to reorganize. Many refugees were on each platform, also looking for the train to Luge. On one such platform, they were reorganizing their things and noticed a lone woman who showed wear from the war clearly on her face. After she introduced herself as Leah, Father started to talk to her and learned that her husband and children had been killed in the war, and she was trying to make her way to Luge to see if any of her relatives were still alive. Father suggested she join them, and he promised to help her make her way through the tens of thousands of refugees in the station. After arriving, they waited several days on the steps of the Jewish Committee's office waiting for housing. Soon they got a room in a building with a large courtyard. The family lived in Luge for several months while they waited for papers to travel to Berlin. The papers came through and they were on their way to Berlin. Leah did not join them, but Father took her address and promised to maintain contact with her. After arriving in Berlin, they again made their way to the United Nations offices. They were given clean clothes, a haircut, and a shower, and were given medical exams. They remained in Berlin for several months in a displaced persons camp, along with many other Jewish refugees from all over Poland and from the areas under Soviet occupation. Father heard that there was another camp set up in Zelsheim, a village near Frankfurt. Father made all of the arrangements, and the family was picked up by a military vehicle and brought there. Father learned that Leah would be coming to the same camp and was very excited to see her again. They quickly slipped into routine, although Father was frustrated that they were so dependent on the relief organizations. Shalom attended school learning Hebrew, arithmetic, and other subjects. Many friends were made there, friends that Shalom still speak to today. Father and Leah wed during this time, and within the 3 years they lived there, Shalom's sisters met their spouses and eventually established families with them. During their time in Zelsheim, Israel gained their independence. This would make it easier for Jews to make Aliyah to Israel and start a new life. Shalom soon found out he would be going to Israel and was very excited to start a new life there. Father said that he and the daughters would arrange their immigration and they would soon reunite as a family. This time when Father and the girls sent Shalom off, they had tears of excitement in their eyes. In January 1950, Shalom landed in Israel with a small knapsack holding all of his possessions. When they reached the kibbutz, they were given time to relax and organize themselves. After a year and a half at the kibbutz, Shalom received a letter saying that his father and Leah would immigrate to Israel. His sisters were to stay in Germany, for they had established themselves and their families there. A few years later, 2 sisters moved to Israel and the other to the United States with their families. When Shalom's father found work and a place to live, Shalom moved in with him and Leah. Shalom spent his time working, and his free time was spent with many friends he had made in Ra'anana since moving there. One Shabbat morning, Shalom went with his friends to the beach to cool off. He was watching a group of kids play soccer and asked to join the game. After making 2 goals within a few minutes, the team told him he should join in. His success on the team made him famous within 2 months and was traded to Hapoel Tel Aviv. Shalom was a star on the team and was recognized everywhere he went. The pay he received from playing and from gardening helped his father with some of the household expenses. In 1953, at 17 years old, Shalom enlisted in the Israeli army. He received a notice that he would be fit to serve in the combat unit and should await his draft notice. After being drafted, Shalom's entire period of his military service was packed with security events, courses, and training. In 1956, he was deployed to the Egypt border before the start of the war. He fought in the war and earned the Outstanding Marksman Certificate due to his excellent marksmanship. During this time, Shalom met his wife, Sarah. When he was discharged from the army, they grew closer. Soon after, they married. In 1960, Shalom boarded a plane to go see his sister in the United States. A few days after arriving, Shalom set out to find work. He noticed a help wanted sign in the window of a cafeteria and went in to find out. The owner told him he needed a dishwasher, and when Shalom was hired, the man asked his name. Shalom answered with his name and then added Sam. That is how his new American name started. One of the diners at the cafeteria knew of his financial struggles and offered him a job cleaning a movie theater not far from Dubrov's where he worked. So every day Sam rushed from Dubrov's to the theater. After 2 weeks of hard work, Sam found an apartment so that when Sarah arrived, they would have their privacy. Soon after, the owner of Dubrow's told Sam that they would be closing for a while for renovations. Sam worried that he would not be able to pay his rent and had to again look for work. Sam contacted a friend who was able to secure him and Sarah jobs at a sweater factory. They had financial security, and until 2.5 years later, the factory was going through financial problems and had to close. Once again, Sam went to his friend for help. This time he was offered a job as a cleaning supervisor at the Kimberly Hotel. One day, the hotel manager told Sam about a card club that needed a replacement for the night shift worker who had gotten sick. Sam jumped at the chance. He built a relationship with one Italian man who offered him a management position in a building that Sam later realized was inhabited with drug dealers, so he declined the offer. Later, the Italian once again approached Sam and offered him to buy the building, working out payment plans. A friend of Sam's, who was a lawyer, told him to take the deal and he would represent him. After cleaning out the drug dealers, Sam renovated the building on credit and then rented each room, allowing him to pay back all his debts. To this day, Sam still owns the building, and instead of renting rooms, all apartments are rented. After seeing what a success Sam was at handling the building he was sold, the Italian again offered Sam another building that contained 6 stores and 150 hotel rooms. To this day, the hotel is owned by Sam and is still a success. Sam was heavily involved and interested in all things having to do with Israel. Through acquaintances, Sam met many important Israeli politicians who looked to him for advice and financial help. Through the years, these meetings took place more often, either in person or on the phone, and Sam stayed heavily involved in politics. To this day, Sam is still involved in politics and helping all things having to do with Israel. He remains friendly with many politicians, Israeli as well as politicians from many other countries. Countless dollars and hours have been spent on making the situation better for Jewish people around the world, and to this day, he continues to do so.